Hi, Lou Pulsfer here, and the topic is card-driven versus card-augmented wargames. Now, I've put cards in quotation marks because I'm not just talking about tabletop games. You don't think of it as cards. Think of it as something that you acquire or that you have that affects how you play the game. So any random draw or drop or perks can be incorporated into games, whether it's tabletop or video. So what we're really talking about is uncertainty-based acquisition and use of something that either, one, governs most of what you can do, which is card-driven, or two, provides rule exceptions and temporary capabilities. Typically, cards in a card-driven game determine how many actions you can take and often where you can take them, for example, left, right, or center of a battlefield. Memoir 44 is a well-known board game, for example, that uses this method. Fundamentally, a card-driven game is one that allows you to do little or nothing except what a card you play says you can do. So you have a choice, but a choice only within your hand of cards. So the main activity is constrained by the cards. The card will often have historical flavor text. In some games that may actually relate to what you can do with that so that the historical sense makes sense in the context of the activity, and a lot of times it doesn't. It's just there for flavor and doesn't affect the game. Now, what the card lets you do may be somewhat broad, as in move 3 units to attack on the right, or it can be pretty narrow. It depends on the game. Card-driven games tend to have a tactical feel to them because you can't plan very well. You don't know what cards you're going to get. You know what cards you have in the deck, but you don't know what ones you're going to get. So they tend to appeal to improvisers or adapters more than for planners. Even a game like Twilight Struggle, which is supposed to be a worldwide game about the Cold War, has a very tactical feel to it, even though theoretically it's a strategic game. Now, card-augmented games use the cards in conjunction with the rest of the game. They're kind of one-shot, randomly allocated abilities. They provide unusual occurrences. So card augmentation really improves the replayability of a game without dominating the game, unless the designer lets the cards dominate the game. I personally don't like to have the cards dominate the game. I just want them to provide variety. The cards in an augmented fashion are especially useful when you have a deterministic conflict resolution method. In other words, when you have a game without some of the typical uncertainty, then to avoid it being a puzzle, you can augment it with cards to make for changes. Now, cards then, in the augmented version, provide rule exceptions. Unfortunately, it means someone has to read the cards. The player has to read the cards. That's a lot to ask of many game players nowadays. An advantage is that many of the exceptions in the game are not part of the rules, so players don't have to deal with them until they pick the card, if they read the cards. But this kind of use of cards really helps replayability. Replayability is much less important in the current climate, perhaps, where a few games are played more than 1 to 3 times, but it's still desirable. Even a single deck of cards, which is 55 cards normally, can provide enough combinations to power replayability for many plays of a game. You could say, and I would say, that card-driven games are for improvisers. Card-augmented games are for adapters. Planners rarely like card-driven games. They may like card-augmented games, or they may not. Thanks for listening.